Do you believe in miracles, divine intervention, visitors from beyond the grave? I'll tell the tale, and you be the judge. In 1986, a deranged evil genius sat in the center of a classroom in Cokeville, Wyoming, tethered to a bomb by a dead man switch on his wrist. Packed into the classroom around him, the entire student body of the elementary school. And that bomb was capable of not only taking down that entire school, but setting the very air itself on fire. And according to at least 30 people in that classroom who witnessed the events of that day, miraculous things occurred. This is the story of the Cokeville Elementary School Bombing, also known as the Cokeville Miracle. So, who was this evil genius that would commit such an act? His name was David Young. He was born in California and moved to Grinnell, Iowa when he was 4. He was an adopted child, but by all accounts had a perfectly normal childhood in a blue collar household, no abuse or anything like that. They did say he always had a very unhealthy obsession with guns. David is pretty normal throughout his childhood until high school. And in high school, he takes this philosophy class. And he gets his first B in his whole life in this philosophy class. And he litters that whole textbook with all these writings in the margins about how the textbook is incorrect. During this class, he also finds this book entitled Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And after that, he bases basically his whole life around the philosophies discussed in this book. He starts to lose his dreams of becoming wealthy when he grows up, and instead, he starts focusing intensely on the afterlife. He is now fully in the belief that there is reincarnation and that when he dies, he is going to go to this place called the Brave New World to live his next life. He goes away to college and he gets a degree in criminal justice, and he serves as a deputy sheriff during that time in Nebraska. He gets a job in Cokeville and he's hired as the town marshal in 1979. He works as the town marshal for 6 months, but he gets fired at the end of his probationary period because the town sheriff just said he was a weird kind of guy. It was not the kind of guy that they wanted as the town marshal. Did not have what it takes. He has just struck everybody as being a weirdo. They would all jokingly refer to him as Wyatt Earp because he wore the big cowboy jacket, cowboy hat, and carried the 6 shooters and just had that cowboy old West persona about him. David gets married during that time. They have 2 children and then he gets divorced. He gets estranged from his oldest daughter, but his youngest daughter is pretty much lives with him the whole rest of his time, and his daughter's name is Princess. David's journals and writings reveal that he was a very troubled man. He spent most of his life grappling with deep philosophical questions about man's existence, the afterlife, spirituality, and he believed strongly in reincarnation. In fact, when David did the bombing, he took everything with him that he felt was important. Authorities would later come to believe that it didn't matter what they did that day, that there would have been nothing that they could do differently. There would have been no way to reason with him, that no matter what, his entire plan was to kill those kids and take them to this brave new world. He thought that's where they'd all be transported to. But despite all of these things, his uncle, Luke Myers, would describe him and his wife, Doris, as pretty level headed people. And he couldn't imagine in his wildest dreams that David could do something like this, that he could terrorize a town and blow up an elementary school. And also, on the day of the bombing, David wasn't alone. David's wife, Doris, was right by his side, a delusional Bonnie and Clyde. They lived in a mobile home in Tucson with David's youngest daughter, Princess. And it was during this time that David got even weirder than he was already known to be. He became extremely reclusive, spent all his time focusing on philosophical readings and writings just 24 hours a day. And over the course of several years, as Doris worked hard as a housekeeper and waitress to support their meager lifestyle, David wrote his philosophy. And he had titled his philosophy Zero Equals Infinity. And this would later become known as David's manifesto. Lead investigator Ron Hartley later said that he thought Doris may have battered woman syndrome and very low self esteem. However, the fourth grade teacher who was a survivor of the bombing, Cliss Sparks, she described Doris a little bit differently. In her words, she was a dumb. Her hair was long and dark, but she would have done anything he asked her to do and done it willingly. I don't know if that's a reference to because she wasn't a dumb blonde, she should have been smart because her hair was long and dark, and then she wasn't smart. I don't know. But that's how Cliff said it. And when she came to my door to bring me and my kids down to that room to be held hostage with all the others, she initially hid her gun. I don't know where she had it, but then when she came back out to get us, pointing that gun at us, there was no kindness, no sympathy. She wanted us in that room. Doris did truly seem to believe that David was the most brilliant genius in the world. And she just had this cult member like total belief in him, hung on his every word, did everything he told her to do. But David's diaries also revealed that he was a very possessive man when it came to Doris. He talked about her in minute detail, everything she did, every bite of food she ate. He weighed her every day and logged how much she weighed. And Doris kept some diaries too, and in hers, she talked about how if she gained even a single pound, he would punish her, that he was very controlling, but yet she still had this sort of belief that he's just this most amazing genius in the world, and I must let these things happen and do all his bidding because she was just completely taken with him. And those who knew Doris both before and after she married David are still completely taken aback and dumbfounded by her involvement in any of this, because prior to this, no one in the world would have ever guessed she would be the kind of person who would ever do something this crazy. And it seems to me, from all I've gathered, that David seemed to be a silver tongued snake kind of a man. And I think that Doris so willingly participated in all of this because she was completely brainwashed to the point where she was living with David in this shared delusion. So soon after writing his philosophy, David began to tell people about this plan he had, and he called this plan the Biggie. He said that this plan was going to make him rich beyond his wildest dreams, and anyone who invested, they were going to be rich too beyond their wildest dreams. And he managed to get three of his friends to actually invest in this plan. Now, they believed that what they were investing in was a new energy source that David had created because he was such a super genius. He couldn't even begin to explain this new energy source to his friends. And whenever they'd try and get him to explain it to them, he would just give them a copy of the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and tell them, read this. This is what it's all about, but they couldn't read it. I mean, this book was a thesis that aimed to probe the meaning of quality and the account of modern crisis caused by the absence of quality. And the last part of the book points out how to reconcile the conflict between humans' value and technological needs so as to achieve the ultimate goal of enhancing people's happiness. So there you have it, clear as muddy water, a synopsis of this book. That's David's Guide to Life, a book he lived and breathed by. His daughter, Princess, really thought that her dad's plan might be to knock over a bank. So, Princess, thinking maybe her dad's big plan to get rich was he was going to rob a bank, she even helped him build the bomb. She helped him build the test bombs that he tested in the Arizona desert. David had previously put a bomb in a sealed school bus in the Arizona desert that he had built, and he blew it up to make sure that this design worked properly, and it worked beautifully. All his test bombs did. The day before this plan, the biggie, was going to occur, he had all three of his investors drive up to meet him. But the night before, he refused to tell them what the plan was. So one of his investors got mad. Sounds sketchy to me. I've invested all this money, and now you won't tell me what it is, and you're acting all weird about it. And I don't want to be any part of this anymore. I am leaving. I'm not going to deal with you anymore. It's ridiculous. But the other investor stayed. First thing in the morning, David went and he mailed some packets. Packets that he mailed out were copies of his manifesto, Zero Equals Infinity, and he sent it to President Ronald Reagan, the president of the college he attended in Nebraska, and numerous media outlets. And after he sent out his manifesto, he took everybody, stopped on the side of the highway, and he told them the biggie turned out to be a plan to take over Cokeville Elementary School, hold everyone inside hostage for $2 million each. Then his plan was he was going to detonate this bomb. He and the money and the children and Doris and his friends, Princess, they would all go to the brave new world. And in this brave new world, David was going to be rich because he was going to go with all that money that he had demanded. And he was going to be God and he was going to rule over them like a king. And when his two investors heard what his plan was, They refused to have any part of that. They're like, "Oh, hell no, I'm not gonna go hold a school hostage. Are you crazy? Like, what are you bomb it and go to the next life. What?" And David pulled a gun on them and ordered Doris and Princess to handcuff the men. So the men were handcuffed at gunpoint in the back of the van. Princess also did not want anything to do with this once she heard what her father was planning. But Doris was like, "Yeah, I'll do it. I'll totally help you." The whole time they're driving, Princess is crying. The date is May 16th, 1986. So when the van first drives by the school, it's recess time. And he sees that a lot of the kids at the school are out on the playground having recess. They drive past up the hill near the town landfill where they have a clear view of the school. And David gets out and with binoculars, he sits on that hilltop and he just watches the school and waits. And once all the kids go inside, they drive down and they back up to a little loading area, just a little area where janitors might load and unload things. They began to unload. Princess is crying and she's just sobbing. She's really upset with her dad. She is terrified about this plan. She just saw her dad hold his friends at gunpoint. She knows now all of a sudden that her dad is crazy and he's about to do some crazy things. And she is just mind blown. And he says, "If you don't want to go with me, that's fine. You're no daughter of mine." And he turns with Doris and they head into the school. Right now, at this point, it is shortly after 1 p.m. David and Doris have 17 rifles, several handguns, the ammo, and the bomb concealed in a cart. The bomb is also attached to David by the dead man switch. Months before, David worked to perfect this bomb, and he detonated test bombs in a place he called the Blowhole in the Arizona desert. And every bomb he had built had detonated perfectly, just as you'd expect bombs built by a genius to do. This bomb had aluminum powder and flour in the very bottom level of the bomb. This was designed where first a small detonation would occur, and that would cause all of this powder to go up into the air. And then once all the powder was hanging in the air, the next detonation in the bomb would occur. And this detonation would send shrapnel. And the shrapnel he had in his bomb was chain links and bullets. Then on the very top, there was a 1 gallon jug of gasoline with a blasting cap inside it. And that was the ignition source that was going to explode the very last part of the bomb. It would happen in rapid succession. The gasoline part, when that exploded, that was going to catch all the aluminum powder and flour in the air, which was going to flash. So that was going to burn extremely bright, extremely fast. And that's the kind of flash that sucks all the air out of the room, singes everyone's lungs. Everyone will die in a blast like that. He also had brought plenty of materials to make more bombs while he was there so that he could booby trap places and prevent officers from coming in. So he goes into the office, him and Doris, and they stand at the front desk. And this is the desk where Christine Martina Cook, everyone called her Tina, worked as the school secretary. So she's expecting just the kindergarten teacher applicant that afternoon. She looks up and she sees 3 people standing there, an older couple and this young lady. So she assumes that the older couple must be the job applicant's mother and father. She informs the job applicant the principal isn't quite back from lunch yet, but if you just want to take a seat and wait, he'll be back in a few minutes. That's fine. So the young woman asked her, "In the meantime, where's your bathroom?" So Tina directed her over to the bathroom, and David just stands there with Doris. And Tina starts to realize that she's invited the job applicant to go and take a seat, but her parents are still just standing there. So she says, "Can I help you with something, sir?" And David Young says, "Mrs. Cook, are you Mrs. Cook?" And she says, "Yes, I am." And he just stated, "Mrs. Cook, this is a revolution. We are taking your school hostage, and you need to step back from your desk. Do not touch any buzzers. Do not push any buttons. Don't sound any alarms, and do not answer any phones." And at this point, Janelle is returning from the mailroom. And Tina, the school secretary, is like, "Janelle, these people are here to take us hostage." And David at that point just looked at them and said, "I have guns." And he pulled open his jacket, and sure enough, he was strapped with handguns and ammo all underneath his jacket on his hip. He definitely had guns all on his belt and everything else. Then he showed her the cart, and it had a bunch of rifles on it, and he showed her the bomb. The bomb itself had, like I said, was topped off with that big jug of gasoline at the top. And he told the women in the office, "This is a bomb. And if you will notice, I have a cord wrapped around my wrist. This cord is attached to a string. The string is attached to the bomb with this clothespin. If I were to be hit, shot, or knocked over, or jostled in any way, this clothespin is going to pull off this bomb and this bomb will detonate. And it'll take everybody out in this whole school. And I know because I've blown them up in the desert. I know the damage this bomb can do. And he then told his wife, "You go around the desk." And he ordered Tina, the school secretary, to unplug the phone that was at the desk. So as she's unplugging it, he asked her how many other phones are in the school. And she said there are 5 phones in the school in total. This was the 80s, no cell phones. There was just a few landlines in every building. It's typically how it worked. So he said, "Any other phones in the office?" She's in the principal's office. So he told her, "Go in there and unplug that phone." She turned and he was like, "Stop." And so she kind of stopped and he told Doris, "You go with her." And as her and Doris went to go into the principal's office, he said, "Hold on, Miss Cook. I guess you do realize right now that the life of everyone in this building depends on what you do right now. How you react right now is going to make all the difference in the world. And you're doing just fine, Miss Cook. You're doing just fine. Now let's just unplug that phone and let's go out of there, okay?" And around this time, the poor job applicant returns from the bathroom and they take her hostage at gunpoint. A little office aid's taken hostage, and the poor UPS lady walks in the door. So she's taken hostage and added to this group of terrified and confused hostages. The music teacher, he starts to pass by. They grab him, and then a fifth grade teacher comes walking out of the fifth grade hall, Mr. Moore. And David hides his gun real quick and walks out and says, "Well, hey, Mr. Moore, hi." And Mr. Moore kind of looks at him, and David's like, "You remember me?" And he's like, "No, I don't recall that I do." And David's like, "Remember, I used to rent from you back in the day." And Mr. "Oh yeah, David. How are you, David? How's it going?" And they chat for a couple minutes, just this friendly chat. And then David just pulls out a gun and he said, "Don't try anything or I'll blow your head off." David and Doris then decide that they need to find a room to be their headquarters for this hostage situation. And so they found this conference room that was close by. And they herded their group of hostages into the conference room. And David looked around the conference room and was like, "No, this is way too small. This room is just not going to work. It's not big enough for everyone. We're going to have to go find another room. Let's go." So he ordered everyone out into the hallway, and they were making their way down the hallway to find a new room. And they ran into the school custodian. And this guy was huge. He was like 6'3", built. And he saw this kind of weird group and said, "What's going on?" And David told him, "Mind your own business. Just go on." And he saw the cart full of weapons and he assumed they must be having some kind of gun safety assembly. Fine, I'll mind my business. He wasn't going to ask any questions, so he just went right on down to the school cafeteria to fix the dishwasher he needed to fix. Princess. And so she burst through the back door of the school and she was just like, "I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe you're going to do it. I can't believe it. Don't do this. Why are you going to do this? Don't do this. This is crazy." And he just threw the keys at her and he told her, "Just get the hell out of here." So Princess, she turns and runs. She just runs away because she knows she's got to get help. She's got to go tell somebody. So she runs to the van where his friends are handcuffed in there and she jumps in and she just hauls butt to the town hall. She runs in and she already tried to yell to somebody else and they just didn't believe her. And she runs in yelling, "You stupid effing people. What the hell is matter with all of you guys? You don't give a about your kids. My dad's at the school and he's over there and he's going to blow them all up and you don't even care." And Kevin Walker, he's the town public works director and one of the town's firemen. And he just is like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. You don't need to use that kind of language in here. We are in a public building. Now, if this was Chicago or something, I would believe you, but we are in downtown Cokeville, and I don't believe you." And she was just kind of froze and she was just like, "You don't believe me?" Because I think in her mind, she felt like, "I'm going to go do this heroic act." And she didn't consider the fact that she might get there and they're just like, "We don't believe you." And he's like, "No, I don't. This is Cokeville, Wyoming, not some big city. Why would anyone want to do something like that here?" And Princess said, "Well, then would you believe the 2 handcuffed men in my van?" And David said, "Show me." So Princess takes him out and shows them there are men handcuffed in her van. And he takes them into the room in the town hall and he questions them, and they all have the same story. So he pops out his head and he yells, "It's real, guys." Because the other people had heard her running in and screaming all these things as well. And the other people included Kathy Davison. She was the town's emergency management coordinator, and she had been emergency management coordinator for all of 6 weeks. And at this point, Princess is like, "Well, I need a sheriff. Come on, let's go. Let's move it, move it." And Kathy, she was trying to get information from Princess. And so she told the secretary, she said, "Call the sheriff." The secretary said, "I can't. The sheriff's out of town." "We'll call the marshal then." "I can't. The marshal is out of town." Kathy was like, "All right, we'll call the next town over and ask for their sheriff to please be sent here right away because we need law enforcement here now." So the tech secretary said, "Fine, I'll call and tell him." And so Kathy's trying to talk to Princess, and the secretary's like, "Kathy, what? They won't believe me. They won't believe me." And Kathy is just so frustrated, but she goes over and she gets on the phone. She identifies herself as who she is and tell them, "We need the sheriff and all the law enforcement officers that you have. There is an incident at the elementary school. We need everyone that you have. We need them here now. Now. Get them here now." And the dispatcher said, "Oh my God, this is the real thing." Kathy's like, "Yes, it's a real thing." And the dispatcher, "Okay, okay, right away, right away." In the meantime, inside the school, Doris and David had found a classroom big enough in Miss Mitchell's first grade classroom. This classroom was about 30 feet by 32 feet, designed to hold about 30 little kids and their teacher. So, having found that acceptable classroom in classroom number 4, David entered and announced to Miss Mitchell, "We are revolutionaries, and this is a revolution." And at first, Mrs. Mitchell thought it was a joke. And she was like, "You're kidding." And he just stone cold looked at her with those dead eyes of his and he told her, "Sit down." And she smelled gasoline and she realized, "Oh, this is not a joke." David began at that point to line up his arsenal of weapons meticulously along a table and the base of the chalkboard behind him. Then he set himself in the center of the room with the bomb. And while he was doing this, Doris went around to gather all the rest of the hostages. She did this by going door to door and telling all the rooms that there was an assembly and their presence is required to come to this assembly. And so all the children in the rooms were initially just really excited to go to this assembly in the middle of the day. Surprise assembly, yay. But when they entered the classroom, they saw David there with the bomb and the guns. And some of the kids got really excited. They also thought, "This is a really cool assembly about weapons. This is cool." Others kids saw the weapons and they were older and had had some of these assemblies and they knew something was wrong. This was not the way it was done, not the way they did it. Third grader Jamie King was one of those who immediately knew something was off. She'd actually begun to have a really bad feeling when she was coming in from recess, and she'd put her hand on her friend's shoulder and said, "I just have this feeling it's going to be a really bad day," which is kind of eerie because that's when David was on the hill watching them with the binoculars, planning to come and take them hostage. So she had good intuition, that one. Then the kids, they'd all gone back to her classroom, and it was the time of day in Jamie's class after recess where they laid their heads down on their desk and their teacher would read them a story. And it was one of Jamie's favorite parts of the school day was to lay her head on her desk and listen to the teacher read a story. During the story, a knock came on the door, and her teacher, he got up and answered the door. And at the door, there was a lady with kind of this big, puffy, dark hair. And she asked the teacher, "I need you to please get the students lined up for assembly." And Jamie said the kids in her classroom were ecstatic. But she remembered looking at her teacher, and her teacher was looking confused. He went ahead and did as he was asked and lined all the kids up at the classroom door. He hadn't heard about any assembly, but nice ladies coming and saying the assembly time. So maybe there's some kind of surprise assembly. Maybe there's some news they want to tell everybody. Who knows? So Jamie expects the line is going to go out of the classroom and off toward the auditorium. But instead, the line goes out of the classroom and loops back around and starts going right into the classroom next door. And she's glancing over the shoulders, the kids walking in front of her, and she sees bomb and the guns and gets hit with that strong smell of gasoline. And she just knew something is not right, as they made their way over to the southwest corner of the classroom. Jamie, she recalled at that point David was threatening the children a lot. He had saying, "Be quiet or I'm gonna shoot somebody." Or if anyone leaves this room, I'm gonna shoot somebody. And she said he was just yelling a lot, and sweating excessively, and dabbing his forehead, that he was very nervous, he was very jittery. And she remembered how he explained to all the children basically the concept of the reincarnation and going to the brave new world, that they would die and he would have all this power and control over them once they died. And Jamie just sat there just feeling so angry at Doris. And she was angry at Doris because Doris was the one that was going door to door, luring these kids to that room, knowing that they were all going to die. And so Jamie just spent her day staring daggers at Doris. How could you? How could you betray us this way? The last class to enter the room was the fourth grade class of teacher Cliss Sparks. She too had been reading stories to the children in her room. She was known for being able to do all these great voices when she read the stories, and so the kids really loved Miss Sparks' stories. She was a great storyteller. And then unexpectedly, this woman comes to the door of her classroom and she told Cliss, because it's the very last class, the very farthest point in the school from this classroom, they want you down at the other end of the school. They want you to be in the hallway. So she lined up her class and she took them out of the room and walked down the hall. But when she got to that other hall, she didn't see anyone like over here or any groups of kids. There's just nobody there. So she wasn't sure where she was supposed to go. So there was an exit door right there. So she just took the kids out of the exit door and figured, I'll just sit them on the grass and read them the book until someone tells us where we're supposed to go. She had just gotten all the kids settled and sat down and picked up her book. And then Doris reappeared. And this time she had a big gun. And she pointed at them and said, "Oh, you cannot stay here. You have to go inside with the others right now." And Cliss, she didn't want to take any chances of any harm to her children. So she, of course, had to comply. She had no choice. So she gathered up the kids and followed the woman inside, and they were taken then to Miss Mitchell's classroom. So by the time Miss Sparks' class arrived in there was already over 100 men, women, and children packed into this room. And so they didn't have any space. So what they did was David ordered Miss Sparks and some of the other teachers to carry all the tables and things like that out of the room, leaving only just the teacher's desk and like a little table that David had all his guns lined up on and some chairs. But for the most part, they took all the other furniture out. He also asked that they put a bunch of the chairs in the doorway of this adjoining bathroom, because it was the first grade classroom was adjoined to the other first grade classroom with this little kids bathroom in the middle, just a single person little kids bathroom. So doors could open on both sides and it was like a walkway. So he didn't want kids escaping through that walkway. So he asked them to stack up the chairs right there to block that exit of the room. Miss Sparks, she really at this point, she was so caught up in what was happening, the immediate demands, that she hadn't even really had a chance to process how dangerous of a situation they were in. But the kids in her class, they definitely realized faster than she did. They felt it, they saw it, and they realized as they sat there that this was an incredibly dangerous situation. Once everyone was finally in the room at last, David informed them that this is a revolution and you're being held hostage. We don't want to hurt you, children. We don't want you to run. We don't want you to try and do anything. We want you to stay away from this cart right here and stay away from the guns. But I do want you children to know that although we don't want to hurt you, if any of you tries to run, we're going to have to shoot you in your legs so that you can't run away. So you won't run. So the kids are being told this, and they're also told that there are men outside, that if they try and run, the men outside will also shoot them. As far as the adults, he told the adults, and we don't have any use for you whatsoever. We will just kill you. If you try and run or you try and do anything, we're just going to put you down. He tells them all of this, and he hands out, during this time, Doris is going around passing out his philosophy, his copies of this philosophy, zero equals infinity, to everybody present. And it may have taken him years to write, but ultimately, this was not some great original thought. It's just merely the ravings of a madman, in my opinion. After reading it and everything else that I've read about David, I'm not even sure he was even a genius at all. I think he may have just been a really good, smooth talker, really manipulative, had a large vocabulary, and used that to convince people that didn't know any better. that he was some super genius, but his great manifesto is just babble. And it's not even original thought. It's stuff that maybe a 15-year-old would sit around and jot when they're thinking all these philosophical deep thoughts or something. Let me give you an excerpt. I'm not going to read you this whole thing because it doesn't make any sense. It gets nonsensical, but this is how it starts. Seemingly, some thousands of years ago, several individuals combined or perceived their combination and therein created man. This creation was and is a concept, a thought or idea, neither right nor wrong, but a way among ways. For the better part of the interim, then, men played with man, making love, fire, food, moors, children, gods, language, tools, waste, etc. Now people come and people go, but always as people. And then it ends with the sentence, we are all one. And we came apart to do this for something to do in nothing and infinity. Surely, some truly revolutionary, original genius thoughts there, folks. So, to quote fourth grade teacher Miss Sparks, it was absolute malarkey, she says. It didn't even make any sense. And furthermore, it was not even well written. It did not even have complete sentences. For shame, David. For shame. First grade teacher Janelle Dayton, she said when he looked at David, it was like David was dead. There's no life in his eyes. There was no spirit there. And that when he got us all in that room and passed out that pamphlet, she remembered that some of the little first graders were trying to read it. And they had been in school for a whole year and they really had confidence that they could read everything. And just the confusion of these kids because this whole thing made no sense whatsoever. So these first graders are trying to read this philosophical manifesto and they're just all, I don't understand. So it's okay, little kids. Nobody understands that manifesto. If someone understands that manifesto, then maybe we should monitor that individual who understands that. Doris then handed Tina, the secretary, a sheet of paper and she told her, you know, everyone in the room, I want you to start writing names. And Tina said, whose names do you want me to write? And she said, everyone. I want you to start with the adults. And after you get all the adults down, I want you to make a list of all the kids. Tina, she wrote her own name down on the list, but she couldn't bring herself to go around gathering names. She couldn't bring herself to go around writing everybody else's names down on that paper for Doris. And through the next couple hours, Doris just kept saying, you have that list done? You got it done? You're like, not yet. I don't have it done yet. I'm not done yet. And she'd be like, get it done. We need it done. We need it done now. But she just said she couldn't do it. She couldn't bring herself to do it. Teachers and staff, they were trying to keep all these kindergarten through sixth grade students calm and entertained, but the kids were getting restless. They're hot and they're just scared and moving all around, starting to wiggle around, having a hard time sitting still. And the teachers were starting to get really afraid that the kids were going to bump David and make the bomb go off, or bump the bomb, bump some guns, knock those down. Those were going to make the bomb go off. And so one of the teachers asked David, do you mind if I put a square of tape around where you're sitting in the room? We'll keep the kids on the outside. We'll call it a magic square. We'll keep the kids on the outside of the magic square. And that way the kids won't bump you or anything like that. And David had been getting anxious about this too, about how much the kids were moving around, how close they were to him and the bomb, because it just took the slightest little bump or jolt. And that dead man switch was going to detonate that thing. And he wasn't ready. He didn't have the money yet. Wasn't ready for detonation. So he said, sure, go ahead. And he let him do it. And the teachers, they moved everything back and they just made this big, like 12 by 12 square in the middle of this room. So the kids are just now sitting along the edges of the room. They don't have a lot of space, but David's in the middle with the bomb. Once they finished that, then Miss Mitchell stood up and she, children, and she explained this is a magic square. We all have to stay outside the magic square. Do you understand that? And she said, you can sit anywhere in this whole room that you want, but it must be outside the lines of the magic square. No one goes in there. And the kids were very good. They stayed outside the magic square. However, the smell of gasoline in that room was getting so strong. It was making the kids sick. Some of the kids were vomiting. People were generally getting headaches, and it was becoming tense. It is hot, stuffy, not a good scene. Back at town hall, Kathy, along with the state emergency coordinator, Grant, they were trying to get some type of response organized to the situation because they're only true, like, official people right now in the town to organize these things at the moment. And that's when Princess told them, "You can't send anyone to the school. You can't send people there." Because my father said that if anyone shows up at the school, he's going to start shooting the kids. And he said he'd shoot them with the 22 because he didn't want to kill them. He just wanted to wound them. Every time he saw someone come toward the school, he's going to shoot a child in the legs. So Grant hears about this threat and he's like, "Oh, crap, I got to go do something because now people are going to be rushing over to the school and they're going to get the kids shot." So he rushes off to go try to block off the little road that led down to the school. And all he can find is this little red car and he parks it across the street. Kevin Walker, the public works director and the fireman who had spoken to Princess previously, he was the husband of one of Cokeville's EMTs, Glenna Walker, and they had 3 little kids in that school. Kevin knew he had to go home and he had to tell Glenna what was going on, that their kids were being held hostage, and he and Glenna needed to gather emergency supplies, everything that they may need to deal with wounded and injured in the event this bomb does go off and all those children are in there. So he goes home and he has to break the news to Glenna. "Honey, I'm sorry. Our kids are being held hostage at school. We've got to get ready. We've got to get stuff to deal with this." Glenna hears about it, and of course, as any mother would be, she's absolutely horrified, but she's also an EMT. And her first thought is, we got to help those babies. If something does happen, we have to be ready to treat all these injured babies. So they rush out of the house and they get her ambulance all prepared and she gets rolled out onto Main Street. They're now going to form a response convoy. They have a staging area that's back far enough from the school where it's not going to make David mad and make him shoot kids, and where they're safe in case it does explode. They have calculated how far back they need to be to avoid this explosion. So Glenna's safe inside the ambulance and pulled out in her ready to roll position. And Kevin runs off and he's got to get a hold of the bomb guy, the bomb squad people. One of the reasons he's so anxious to take off is something that Princess told him. He did not tell Glenna because he did not want to terrify her any more than the situation already was. But Princess had told Kevin he's got enough explosives in there to blow that whole school up. I mean, gone. If it goes off, it's gone. Not only is the school gone, the houses all surrounding the school, everything is gone. I've seen the way these bombs explode. Everything's going to be gone. And as the calls were being made requesting resources, Rich Haskell, he was the only certified bomb technician in the southern half of Wyoming, and he was just enjoying a baseball game on a Friday afternoon when he gets notified by dispatch that there is a bomb situation at the Cokeville Elementary School, and he is being requested to come to their aid immediately. So, hearing this, he calls his sheriff that he reports to. He explains, and the sheriff says, "Go, go, 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 go." So, Rich runs home. He grabs a change of clothes. He grabs all his supplies because as a bomb technician, you have your suit and all your equipment to disarm the bombs. And so he gathers that stuff real quick and he jumps in his car and he made it to Cokeville in record time. He actually arrived in an hour and 10 minutes. And from where he was, when he got the call at the baseball game, he made it from where he was to Cokeville in a time that meant that he would have to have been driving well over 100 miles an hour the whole trip. And he later admits that he doesn't think that he ever looked at his speedometer a single time on that whole hour-long trip. So he's on his way as fast as he can. Meanwhile, Glenn is in her ambulance and she sees this posse of armed fathers headed down the street. And she has to jump out and try and tell them, "You cannot go there and try and shoot this man. He is attached to the bomb with the dead man switch. If you shoot him and take him down, all the kids are going to die." He said as soon as he sees people headed toward the school, he's going to start shooting the children. Then he's going to blow up that bomb. You can't just go down there and assassinate him. If you do that, they're all going to die. You have to stay back. So please, please, it's for the safety of the kids, stay back. You cannot storm the school. It's too dangerous. Everybody could get killed. And her husband, Kevin, he's having a similar experience. He's got this other father with a rifle, and he's like, "My kids are in there and I'm going to get them." And Kevin's trying to be like, "No, you're not." And the guy and him are arguing back and forth. "Yes, I am. Oh, no, you won't. Oh, yes, you will. No, you won't." And the guy is like, "I've got a gun here." And Kevin's like, "And I'll kill you with that gun to keep you from going to that school. You're going to get one of those kids shot or killed, and I'll kill you first." And he said, "You need to take your gun and go to the football field and wait with everybody else. And you can wait there until the situation is handled. Please." The dad went ahead and he went. And Glenna said, with all that going on, she remembers being struck by the contrast between what was happening and how beautiful the day was. That it was just this gorgeous day with this slight warm spring breeze, and this beautiful blue sky. And there's this horrible thing happening. When I was researching this story, I clearly recall having a very similar experience on the day of the Uvalde mass shooting. I live less than an hour from Uvalde. So when the news broke, and my fiance's calling me from work saying he's seeing all these convoys and military vehicles and everything else flying down the highway headed out to Uvalde, I remember being in my kitchen. And of course, I was devastated, but I was also feeling the deepest, darkest, blackest rage that I had ever felt in my life toward that shooter, and just these intense emotions, just the most anger. And I walked out and I just sat on the stairs of my back porch and looked up, and it was a stunningly beautiful day. And there were just swarms of thousands and thousands of white butterflies everywhere. And they were just flitting to all these wildflowers. And there was this white horse running in the field. And it was just this absolute surreal moment of how could it be so beautiful and perfect, why such horror is happening nearby. So when I read this part of the story, I really understood personally what Glenna was talking about, because it is a striking thing. If you ever, hopefully none of you ever, have something so horrific happening so close to you and your children, but if it does, you will find that it is just a bizarre feeling that you get when nature is in her full and most magnificent, beautiful glory. At the same time, a horrific event is unfolding. And your brain doesn't make sense. Your brain is expecting, I don't know what it's expecting, but the way it hits is a really striking thing. Meanwhile, back to our story, Princess, she was having a hard time being fully transparent with Kathy. She was literally 2 years old when she found out her dad was a murderous, suicidal monster. And she's not only dealing with feelings of she doesn't want her dad to die, but she's dealing with the embarrassment and the shame. I'm going to be tied. My name's going to be forever tied to this monster and his monstrous acts. And she just felt like such a traitor telling on her dad. And she just didn't want to say his name when they were asking, "What's his name? What's his name?" She just didn't want to say it. Up until then, he'd been her loving, weird, quirky dad that she built bombs with. But now he's a psycho and he's a monster. And she just didn't want to believe it. I can't imagine being in her shoes as a teenager. I really can't. At first, she just would tell them he used to work for Cokeville. And after a while of Kathy just poking and prodding and begging, she finally said, it's David Young, the former town marshal, David Young. And my stepmother, Doris, is with him, helping him. And while Princess is down at town hall trying to process the fact that her father is a hostage taking lunatic, her father was ordering the school principal to the office to make a series of phone calls. He wanted him to call the president, he wanted him to call the FBI, he was wanting him to demand $2 million per child. He let them know he had already sent a letter to the president. He felt that if the state won't pay and the president won't pay, that he wanted the LDS church to pay for the children because that was a heavily Mormon area. And he knew that the LDS church loved children and valued children immensely. And that if no one else would pay, he was sure that he could get them to pay the ransom for each child. 40 minutes into the chaos, the sheriff from the neighboring town arrives and asks Kathy to brief him. What's going on? What have you done so far? What do we still need to do? And as soon as she told him, he looked at Kathy and said, "Okay, Kathy, now go evacuate homes." Kathy was like, "That's not my job." And he's like, "It is now." So Kathy and the highway patrol go and they start trying to evacuate homes around the school because, as Princess has said, he has enough explosives in there to level the whole block and they need to get people out of the surrounding homes. Well, those residents in that rural town, they weren't so happy about the law coming to tell them to leave their homes. So they're pulling guns and ranting and raving, and Kathy's trying to talk down this one man with a gun who's all upset. And she's like, "Look, you're not even going to have a home. If the bombs that are in that school detonate, it's going to take out your home. Your home's going to be gone. It's not even going to be here. So I think that you and your wife should please go to the senior center where there are people waiting to greet you. Since you're being displaced from your home, they're there with coffee and sandwiches. Please go to the senior center." So they're directing all the people they're evacuating from their homes over to the senior center, and the seniors are there to welcome them. Coffee, sandwiches, make them comfortable. Luckily, in all cases of everyone who is refusing to leave, this explanation got them to evacuate. So at this point, Princess is just losing it. She's in town hall and she's just fully broken down. She's sobbing and just like, "My dad's such a bad person. He's going to kill people. And I don't want my dad to die. Please don't let my dad." So she's just hysterical and going through all of those emotions, as you would imagine, and didn't know what to do. She's absolutely beside herself. I mean, really, at the heart of this kid just didn't want anybody to get hurt, and everybody was going to get hurt. And it was just her own personal hell that she was living through in that moment. Her dad was all she had. She was about to lose her father. What a nightmare. But she kept talking to the officials and she was trying to tell them everything she could remember, everything she overheard, everything that was said that day. She said that he had scouted out several other schools, but according to Princess, he chose Cokeville, in her words, because Cokeville had such a minimal presence of law enforcement, almost no law enforcement in town, and had a huge presence of LDS in the community. And he was sure, like I said before, that they would pay the ransom if no one else would. Mrs. Sparks remembers David telling those in the room that when he exploded the bomb that he had built, that everyone was going to be killed and that the children would all be transported to an island off the coast. And she couldn't remember if it was the East Coast or the West Coast. She said that when David was telling everyone these things, he just seemed so certain that everything was going to go exactly as he planned and they were for sure going to go to this brave new world. Mrs. Sparks, having already sort of established a rapport with David, she was upset because he had all these guns lined up and all these little kids around. She was worried the little kids were going to knock over the guns and that would be dangerous for the children. And she had confronted him and she expected some pushback. But as soon as she's like, "This is dangerous, the kids could knock these over." He's like, "Oh, you're right. Oh my goodness." And he had immediately taken all the guns, taken them to the hallway and lined them up by the coat racks to keep the kids safe. And so she just keeps telling David, "We have to take care of these children. You know that we can't let anything happen to these children." And David's like, "Oh, you're right. You're exactly right. We've got to protect the kids." So just, the Sparks is like, "Yeah, we do have to protect the kids." What a weird situation to be in where he's like, "I'm going to blow them up. But yeah, we definitely have to protect them. We obviously can't let anything happen to them." Obviously. Doris, in the meantime, she's pacing all around the room and she's complaining to everyone that she had a bad migraine and the kids are too loud, it's too noisy in here. And the strong smell of the gasoline in the room, it's not only making the kids throw up, it's making Doris's migraine worse. And so Doris asked David, "Can we please open these windows to let the smell out?" So he says, "Fine." So they open all the windows along the wall. David says for the bathroom that's open, just make sure that stays blocked off with desks because we don't want any children escaping through there. The kids they're trying to keep them all busy, playing games, watching movies. Some of the kids, they were beginning on their own accord. They were gathering in little groups of 6, 8, and 10 and praying. And they would say the prayer very quietly as the youngs didn't overhear them. They would just ask God, "God, please protect us. Please protect us." And sixth grader Cameron Wixom, he prayed with about a dozen of his fellow students. They all kneeled and they bowed their heads and folded their arms. And he said after they said that prayer, that the feeling that they all got was just this feeling of total confidence. Like they just placed their lives in the hands of their loving Heavenly Father. And they had this sense of peace, like their part was done. Another student, a fifth grader by the last name of Williams, she said she didn't know how to pray. And the teacher just told her, "You don't need to know how." And so she just crawled over to the little prayer group and emulated them, folded her arms and bowed her head. And she doesn't remember what was said in the prayer, but all of a sudden she just got this feeling like someone put a warm blanket around her shoulders. And she had this incredible amount of comfort and joy that she couldn't explain. And she just said that at that moment, it was like she was being told and just knew in her heart that everything was going to be okay. That no matter what happened, it was all going to be all right. Some kids, they were starting to cry for their mothers and really wanting to go home. And Doris Young, she'd tell the kids, "It's okay. I don't want you to be scared. You don't want to cry because if you cry, you're going to make the other kids cry and then everyone will be crying. And we don't want that. That's no good. Think of this as an adventure like you're in a movie. When you grow up, you can tell your kids that you had this special adventure and it'll be very exciting for you to tell them the story." And then she'd pass out tissues to the kids and just kind of pat them, be like, "Don't cry. We don't want to hurt you children. We're not going to hurt you children. We love children. Of course, we're not going to hurt you." David, throughout this whole time, was having the secretary run notes back and forth to the principal to tell the principal who to call, what he wanted the principal to say when he called them. And ultimately, he had the school principal ask for $308 million dollars for the children. And this would be about $720 million, the equivalent in today's money. Not long after demanding that final amount of $308 million, David just began sweating profusely, and he was starting to look visibly unwell. He was a diabetic, and he did not have any insulin with him. He didn't bring his insulin. I guess he didn't want to have diabetes in the afterlife, so he just left his insulin at home. He had placed several calls throughout the day to town hall, demanding that they get him insulin. And arrangements hadn't been made for a hospital in Idaho to send over insulin to the school, but David's blood sugar was climbing out of control with the stress of the situation. Everything else was going on. He was starting to have a pretty significant health crisis. So he told Doris, "Come here, come here." And he took the bracelet off his wrist and put the bracelet for the dead man switch onto Doris's wrist. And he said, "I need to go in the bathroom." And he went to the bathroom to collect himself and wait for the insulin delivery to arrive. When David initially left to go to the bathroom, Tina, the school secretary, she said that everyone felt a little calmer because David had been progressively more and more agitated and they were nervous he was going to accidentally set off the bomb, that David's eyes were just like looking into emptiness. Everybody just kept describing, and it's so weird when things like this happen. Everybody talks about those dead eyes, and yet again, another story. It's this dead-eyed person doing some insane thing. So they just feel better. He's gone. Doris has got that. Doris has been nice all day, aside from the fact that she rounded everybody up and took them hostage and been held them at gunpoint too. She's been relatively pleasant to the children and the teachers all day in terms of her demeanor. So they felt that maybe it was a little safer. But Tina, just like little Jamie and some of the other women, they almost hated Doris more than David at this point because they knew she was a mother and they just couldn't understand, like, how could a woman do this? A mother? Her doing this, killing little children? Like, what kind of monster is she? And Tina just began thinking, "I'm never going to have a chance to say goodbye to my husband and my kids," because she knew that they weren't getting out of that room. David had told them, "You were all going to die today." And she believed him. She believed he was definitely going to kill them all today. What was going to happen after that, she did not know, but she knew he was going to kill them, and that's for sure. But she says, "I know the children say that they saw angels, and I believe it." She said, "I don't know how to describe it, but I just felt all of a sudden this peace and calmness just filled the room. And it was just this difference. There was suddenly this change in the room that everybody could just feel. And it was nothing that you could physically touch or see. There was absolutely suddenly just this difference in the room. And Janelle had just turned to Tina and expressed doubt. I doubt Doris will, I'm not so worried because I don't think she'll blow the kids up. And Tina was like, I wouldn't be so sure. And Doris just started to mutter to herself in the circle, in the square. She's like, it's getting too noisy. It's too noisy. Miss Mitchell, she kind of signaled the children to be quiet. And one of the teachers, I'm starting to get a headache from the gas smell. And Doris, like, yes, I'm getting a headache too. And when Doris said that, and she said, yeah, I'm getting a headache from the gas smell too, she lifted her hand to her head, the hand that had the bracelet with the dead man switch attached to the bomb. And Janelle looked just in time to see that fireball hitting the ceiling above Doris. The explosion instantly engulfed Doris and a lot of the nearby children in flames. At the town hall, the sheriff had just been informing Kathy the bomb squad from Jackson was on its way when he was interrupted by the sound of the explosion. And Kathy didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to believe it. She's like, no, it has to be an alarm. It has to be something. And they all ran outside, and sure enough, a big plume of smoke was filling the sky. All of this time, the town officials had been trying to get a hold of Ron Hartley. He was the town marshal, and he was the only person who was trained in how to deal with tactical situations. He'd taken a road trip with his friend, and he happened to be returning on the day of the bombing. And as they approached town, he started seeing ambulances flying by, helicopters coming in and out. And he knew something was not right. He also had 4 kids that were in the school that day. So once he's downtown, he immediately, the first person he sees that he knows is Kathy Davison. He's sitting in the passenger seat of the truck. He rolls down the window. He's like, hey, Kathy, what's going on? You got some kind of mock disaster again? And she just said, no, somebody's taken the school hostage and the bomb's gone off. It's gone off. I can't even talk to you right now. They had all the kids in that classroom and the bomb's gone off. Oh, God. And she just ran off. And he has 4 kids in that school. So as a father, he just has a gun under the seat, snatches a gun out from under the seat, and he jumps out and he just takes off running. A little girl by the name of Katie Walker Payne, she was 7 years old, and she was in the classroom when the bomb went off. And she said it was an explosion that I can't explain. She said it was a total and instant blackness, kind of blackness where you can't see anything. And she said, I just felt this like compression and heat, like nothing I've ever felt in my whole life. And I heard the teacher screaming, get down, get down. And she looked in the center of the room, and all she could see was fire. And Katie is one of the children who claims that she was saved by a visitor from beyond the grave that day. And we'll talk about Katie's story in a minute. This other teacher said there were flames all over the room and children were just screaming, and it was pure pandemonium. And Jamie recalls thinking that she had died in the explosion and that all of them were dead. When the room went black like that, only thing she saw was Doris Young in the center of the room, spreading her arms like this and just completely on fire from head to toe. And then the room just went black. And Jamie was so freaked out as a little kid seeing this. She just ran into the corner and just was in the corner. She thought she was dead. She thought everyone was dead. That David had some weird control over everyone because that's what he said, that he was going to have all this control over everyone once they were all dead. And just all of a sudden, someone grabbed her by the back of her shirt and tossed her head first out of the window. And when she landed on the grass outside that window, she jumped up and realized, we're alive. I'm alive. I'm not dead. I'm alive. I'm outside. And she said she remembers seeing everyone's faces just black with soot. And she just took off running. And she crossed that road and got across the street, and she saw her daddy, and he was running toward her with a gun in his hand, and he had been on his way to just go ahead. Once that bomb went off, all those other kids were coming out. His little girl was one of the last kids that came out of there. So he thought that that man had killed his baby. And he was on his way with his gun to go in there and kill that man. And he saw his daughter, and as soon as she saw him, she's like, Dad, I'm so sorry about my shoes. I left my shoes in the room. Should I go back and get my shoes? Because her parents barely had any money. And she knew that she'd be in trouble for losing her shoes. And her dad just, of course, like he did not care. He did not care about those shoes. He just scooped her up. And when he did, she was like, ah. And they realized that she had severe burns, that from her thumb all the way up her arm, she was just severely burned. And as soon as her daddy saw that, he put her right back down. He ran right back toward that school to go shoot that man. and several police officers to wrestle him to the ground to keep him from running into that burning building. So she looks over Jamie after her dad's being wrestled down by police officers, and she notices her mama. And her mama's standing there in this floral outfit with bell bottom pants on. And she just remembers being embarrassed that her mom had dressed that way to come to the bombing, that she had dressed in this floral outfit with no shoes, and said she doesn't have any idea why she thought that because her poor mom had literally just run out of the house with no shoes on in what she was wearing when she heard what was happening to her kids. Then the first responder came up to Jamie and took her out to an ambulance in the street and was like, "You need to get into this ambulance." And Jamie was like, "No, I'm not going to get in the ambulance with you." And she was just in shock. They wrapped her in a blanket and they bundled her onto the ambulance and sent her off to the hospital. Now, Tina, the school secretary at that time, she only remembers seeing blackness when the bomb went off. Then she began through the blackness to see spots of flame, and then she began to see children. And as soon as she started seeing the children, she knew the hallway was off to the side. So she just started grabbing kids as they would run by screen. She would grab them and throw them out of the room into the hall. She was just throwing kids. And she turned and she saw the music teacher run right through the bathroom doorway that had been blocked with all those chairs. And she just thought, "You can't go that way. It's blocked." With the explosion and everything and knocked the chairs there, it wasn't blocked anymore. She grabs another kid up and she turns back around because she heard a sound. And she just sees the music teacher laying on the floor. And she sees David Young standing silhouetted in the bathroom door with the light coming out into the blackness of that room. So he's standing there with that light just pulling out, and he's holding two guns. And he shoots the music teacher. And so she has this kid in her hands. She sees him with the gun. She thinks, okay, he's going to shoot everybody. And she starts looking which way is out now. And now the room is so black, she doesn't see the door to get out. She doesn't see the windows. She doesn't see any way to get out. And then David just turns around and he walks back into the bathroom and shuts the door. So at that point, she realized, okay, the door is right here. She found her way out the door and she didn't see any more kids around. She couldn't feel any more kids around. So she said at that point, she just booked it. She just ran. She took off out the door and down the hall. She didn't think there was any more kids there. But she said as she ran, David's words were playing through her head, telling her that there were men waiting outside. And as soon as they ran out, people were waiting out there to shoot them. So she was fully expecting that as soon as she ran through the door, she was going to start getting shot at. But she just ran anyway. Everything was on fire. So she ran out of the school and she was just booking it down the street. And her friends were trying, people were like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, Tina, Tina, hey, hey, hey." And they were trying to stop and grab her. And she was just like, "No, I can't stop, no." They were like, they got him." And she's like, "No, they don't. He's in the bathroom. What are you talking about? They have him. You know, people are going to kill us." And she's just running, just pure panic. 3 weeks later, Tina's memory would allow her to recall what she'd actually seen in the classroom. She had been completely frozen in shock for the first couple minutes. When the bomb had first gone off and the jug of gasoline had covered Doris, she watched Doris light up like a torch. And Doris had run with her arms spread right toward Tina before she tripped and went down. David had then crawled under the smoke out of the bathroom over to Doris and tried to shoot her once and didn't work. He missed. The second round, dead on, and Doris was gone. David put her down. Some people describe that David had shot Doris out of a kindness because she was on fire and she was screaming and suffering so badly. But Cliff Sparks said she saw it too, and that David was pissed. He was mad because she had set off the bomb and ruined all his plans, and that he came out mad and he shot her in anger, not out of kindness. And she recalls hearing the music teacher screaming, "Run, kids, run, get out, get out." And Mr. Moore was saying, "We can go out the window. We'll put the kids out the window. Let's go, let's go." And he starts tossing all those kids out the window, Mr. Moore does. The music teacher's helping toss the kids out the window. While this is going on, David is down there killing Doris, basically. So they're throwing all the kids out, and Miss Cliss is hearing someone else say, "Let's go through the hallway, out through the other little room. Go, 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 go." David went back into the bathroom and he took his own life. The entire standoff had lasted 2.5 hours. After Kathy, the emergency management coordinator, had seen the plume of smoke, she ran immediately to the triage center they had set up. She had 6 ambulances on scene, which was all the ambulances from all the surrounding rural towns. That was everything they could get there. They had school buses standing by to take the children to hospitals if needed. So all of her preparations, they were definitely going to be used now. She ran around just trying to gather kids. And she runs around the building. She sees firefighters. They're grabbing kids and throwing them out the window. Other kids are crawling on their own out the window. And she said those kids, that those second their little feet hit the ground, that those little kids just were running, and they were running it everywhere. And they were trying to flag these kids down that were injured and burned. They were trying to stop them, and the kids were just flying past them and dodging them and running and going. These kids were just screaming, crying, and they were just black with soot, and they just could not catch these kids. And the first responders at first, they were just baffled at the intensity at which these kids were running away from everyone and running away from the school, but it was because the kids had been told that there were people waiting outside to shoot them. So all these little kids believed once they got out there that they were going to be shot. So some of the kids literally ran all the way home. In fairness, there were gunshots constantly going off. Law enforcement thought that the Youngs were in there engaging in a shootout. The kids thought this was the people shooting them, that David was trying to shoot them as they ran, that these people that were waiting outside to shoot them were shooting them as they ran. But what it was all that ammo that David had in the bomb was going off in the fire, and all their ammunition that they had in the room during the fire, a bunch of the ammunition was going off. So everyone was hearing all these gunshots and sound of bullets whizzing and ricocheting. One of the little students said when he got out, he just saw bodies laying all over the lawn, and he didn't know if they were dead or alive, and everyone was just black from head to toe, so couldn't recognize anybody. And that some kids were running around so badly burned that he just saw like the skin was hanging off their bodies, and he didn't know what to do or where to go. It was just this horror scene, this war zone the kids were all of a sudden in. And then he saw his mama running down the street, and he sees his brother nearby, and he said that he will never forget that moment his mother ran up and just wrapped him up in her arms. He just remembered feeling like, I'm safe. I'm safe now. In the meantime, Mrs. Sparks, she's running around outside the school. She's waving her arms like, first grade over here, second grade over here, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. I want everybody lined up by grades. Like, all of this because she was trying to figure out a way. How are we going to know what kids are still inside? How are we going to know what kids are alive? What kids are dead? How are we going to know like what kids are where? So she's just running around, and she thought in some in the aftermath that she had done a pretty good job and been cool, calm, and collected. And her husband laughed and was like, "Oh, you were not cool, calm, and collected. You were well excited. I'll tell you what, you were running around looking for those kids everywhere, and you were shouting pretty good." Well, Miss Sparks, I do not blame you. I think if I was in your shoes, I would be well excited too and run around shouting pretty good myself. Glenna in her ambulance, she said when that bomb first went off, she just had this moment where she just glitched out. She's like stepping off and back in, step off and back in, step off and back in. It was just like she was just so. I think her mother brain too was probably like, my kids are all in there, my kids are probably all dead. And she just was so complete. Stay with the ambulance or go, stay with the ambulance or what do I do? And then she just sees these kids running down the street. She said it was like a scene when you see civilians in a war zone fleeing the bombing area where the bombs are dropping, people are running and screaming. That's what it was. That it was absolute total mayhem. That some kids were so packed full of adrenaline that they were actually clearing the fences in one leap and just booking it, continuing to run. So at this point, the assembled ambulances and fire trucks and emergency vehicles, they all start to go. They start to advance on the school to help, but she is there trying to catch and treat kids that have made it this far untreated. There are kids that are collapsing in lawns up and down the street. One little girl ran up to Glenna and she's just screaming, I'm on fire, I'm on fire, I'm on fire. And Glenna was like, no, baby, no, 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 you're fine. You're not on fire. You're not on fire anymore. You're not on fire. It's okay. And she took her in the ambulance and started to undress her to check her burns, and all her clothes were just stuck to her skin. She was severely burned under her clothing. So I imagine it did feel very much like she was on fire. And at one point, the little girl had been. So you can imagine Glenna was just trying to calm her down. "No, baby, it's okay. It's okay. You're not on fire anymore. It's gonna be all right." Like I said, some children, they're collapsing in lawns. People are coming out. They're seeing these burned children. They're turning on their water hoses, and they're just trying to spray these kids down. They're trying to cool them off. They're trying to comfort them with the water. And there's a lot of burned kids here. And Glenna, she was just seeing these kids, trying to triage them and trying to take care of them. And they were, the paramedics, they're trying to keep a record of who all they're throwing on ambulance and buses and sending to what hospital and where, so that these parents can have some idea where their kids have been sent to. And Glenna was just certain there's no way we're going to be able to keep track of where we're sending everybody. This is too much. And then she looked over. She's just like, oh, thank God. She sees her little girl, her youngest, and her youngest is all alone, apparently uninjured, just covered in soot, and she's sitting by herself on some concrete, just hugging herself and rocking. And so she runs over and scoops up her little girl, and she tells her, "Where are your brother? And are you okay? Where are your brother and sister?" And the little girl says, "I'm okay. Some lady helped me out, but I don't know where my brother and sister are. I don't know where they are, mom." So about that time, one of the people in a house runs out, and they're like, "Glenna, Glenna, your other daughter's here. She's here, but we have got to get an IV started on her. She's burned real bad." My mother's heart when I tell these stories. Um, so a few minutes later, they come running up with her son Travis. And like, "Here, Glenna, here's your son." They've already started an IV on her badly burned daughter. They're already loading her badly burned daughter up onto an ambulance. So Glenna hops in the front seat of the ambulance with both of her other kids, and she puts them on her lap and gets in the front because there are 6 kids loaded into the back of the ambulance, along with EMTs trying to treat them. And Glenna, by this point now, she's transitioned from first responder to terrified mother. And she said that the ride to the hospital is a 45-mile drive to get from Cokeville to the hospital. And she said the severely burned children in the back, they're just screaming and moaning and crying. That drive is just absolutely the longest drive of her life, having to hear those kids suffering that way. And then once they got to the hospital, they're trying to make their way down the hallway with all these burned kids, and the press is just filling the hallway. They're in the way. They're trying to get around. They're trying to ask her questions as she's trying to get all these kids through. And it was just a mess. It was a mess. And her father in law, he was an old World War II veteran who had actually been captured and kept in a concentration camp. And he had seen bombs and what happens when bombs go off. And he just was sitting in the waiting room once he got there, and he just kept muttering, like, "The bombs went off and the kids got out? How did the bombs go off and the kids get out of that room? How did this happen?" It didn't make any sense to him whatsoever. So Glenna's trying to comfort her son Travis, because her son Travis is just distraught because he had not been the one who saved his little sisters. He was upset because right before the explosion, he had had this super intense feeling, like a voice almost had told him. And he said it's really weird because it was like the sensation of a voice telling you to go do something, but there's not an actual voice telling you to go do something. But it told him to get his little sisters and go put them over by the windows. And they needed to stay over by the windows. And so he had his little sisters been right there on the edge of the tape. And he had taken them and walked them over and put them by the windows. And he told them, "You stay here. I'll stay here with you. I'm just gonna go tell my friends that I'm gonna come over here and sit with you now." So he'd walked across the classroom, and that's when the bomb had exploded. And 3 different times, teachers had to throw Travis out of the classroom because he kept going back and going back and going back, and they were just like, "Why are you going back into the fire over and over?" It was because he was looking for his sisters. He wasn't gonna run away unless he knew his little sisters were safe. And so once they turned him back, he just ran outside the school. He's running all around looking for his little sisters. And that's why he was the last one to be brought by people over to the ambulance area, because he was running around in a desperate search for his little sisters. And he was feeling real bad that he had been away from them and he had not been able to save them. And she was trying to comfort him, like, "You did save them. You took them away from the primary area of the blast and the burns. You got them over by the windows where they were able to get pulled out immediately. It's okay. You did. You did save them." Back at the site there, there's still the sound of gunfire going off, the fire's going off, the firefighters are trying to put out the fire. They're trying to get all these kids sent on buses. And in the midst of this, someone from the senior center approaches Kathy and he's like, "Hey, hey, And she's like, "What? What is it?" And he's like, "We are out of stuff to make sandwiches at the senior center." And so Kathy was just full of adrenaline at that point, and she's just yelling orders anyway. And she's like, "I want you to go down there. You go to that little store. I want you to buy all the lunch meat and all the stuff to make sandwiches. I want you to get it all, buy it all, make all the sandwiches. Just make sandwiches. Go get it all and make the sandwiches." So then she turns and like watches in horror as they toss a body out of the school windows. And she wondered, what are we going to do with the parents when they start taking the kids' bodies out? And the person who had tossed the body out of the window had been Kevin Walker, the firefighter from earlier in the story. And that was the body of Doris Young. And as they picked her up, someone in the room was heard to say, "Well, here's the first one." Because everyone was certain, after seeing the state of everything, that there was going to be a lot more. All in all, 79 children were taken to area hospitals, most of the hospitals over an hour drive from Cokeville, for the treatment of burns and smoke inhalation. Now, after the flood of the children had all been sent off for help, the ammunition had stopped going off, fire was under control, and they realized that in that building there was not a single body of a single child. Every child in Cokeville had made it out with their lives. Then the sheriff approached Kathy with a whole different problem. He said, "Hey, Kathy, I don't know what you're going to do with all these sandwiches. The entire kitchen and everywhere is full of sandwiches." And Kathy was just absolutely drained and overwhelmed at this point. And again, someone's approaching her about these sandwiches. First, there weren't any sandwiches, too many sandwiches. So she's just like, "Maybe we could freeze them and feed them to the seniors. I don't know." So she goes to look at it, and her and the Lincoln County Sheriff, they're getting hit with the crisis is over. All the kids and teachers seem to be alive. Everyone's alive. The only people dead seem to be this hostage taker and his wife. So they're processing what just happened and everything they've been through. And they walk in, and sure enough, there are thousands of sandwiches, just a ridiculous, ungodly amount of sandwiches just stacked everywhere. And they just both burst out laughing. And they're just absolutely laughing to tears because it's ridiculous. And at the same time, Ron Hartley, he has run into the sheriff now, desperately looking for his kids, and the sheriff's like, "Calm down, calm down. I saw your kids. Your kids are all right. I saw them." And he's like, "What do you mean they're okay? Where are they? I need to see my kids." And the sheriff said, "Your kids have already been loaded up and they've been sent to the hospitals. They've been put on the buses and sent to the hospitals. But they're okay. I promise you. I saw them with my own eyes. I saw them get loaded, and they're alive and they're okay." And he's like, "What I need you to do is I need you to get with the other officer, and I need you to get with the bomb technician, and I need you to get up to speed. And your job, you're going to be assigned to investigate bomber David. You take him. We need to find out, get all the evidence you can. We need to find out who he is, who he's working with, what they want, who else might still be out there. 'Cause at this point, they don't know who else is out there. This could still be a terrorist thing. There could still be other people, other bombs, they don't know." So he's like, "Please go find them." And so Ron headed to the school, just like he was told, to go meet up with the bomb technician, Rich Haskell. And as soon as he walked up, Rich just ran up to him and he's like, "You have a miracle here." He was like, "If that bomb had gone off the way it should have gone off, the way it was designed to go off, this whole thing should have just been gone. It just didn't go off the way that it was supposed to." And you see, the bomb that we discussed earlier, it had experienced inexplicably a series of malfunctions that stopped it from igniting the air on fire like it was supposed to and sending out its lethal shrapnel tearing through the innocents in the room. The bomb had that gallon jug of gasoline on the top, and somehow a tiny little pinhole had developed in that jug, and it was letting the gasoline drip, drip, drip slowly but surely all day down, make its way all the way down into the very bottom level of that bomb where all those cans of powder were. And it had soaked all that powder that was supposed to fill the air and ignite with gasoline. Also, two of the blasting caps, the wires had been cut by someone. And still to this day, no one knows. So when the explosion happened, on the bottom of the bomb, instead of blowing powder into the air, it just blew globs of mud out. And then blasting cap that were to blow up and throw all the shrapnel, those are the ones where the wires have been cut, so that didn't go off. So ultimately, the only thing that really went off was some of the gunpowder and the blasting cap that was inside the jug of gasoline. And because they had all the windows and the door to the room open, and the ceiling of the room was those little ceiling tiles that can go up and down, all of that had vented the explosion. So the explosion of the bomb had gone straight up and burst out of the roof and through all the windows, and it didn't get contained in that room as that big concussive sort of force that it otherwise would have. So Rich Haskell said you could see that all the roof tiles had been lifted out of their brackets. And he said, I don't think David was planning on a ceiling that gave way. Because when he was testing those bombs, he was testing them in sealed environments. And so he wasn't planning for that to happen. During the walkthrough that Rich did of the school, he found 4 other bombs. They were then taken outside and detonated by the bomb squad. Inside the classroom, right above the head level of all the children, the entire room was just completely covered in pockmarks from all the bullets that had been going off in the fire, and they were going above the heads of all the children. Not one of them hit child level. They all just hit around the top of the room somehow. And after Ron walked through and he saw that, he went straight outside and got on the radio and called an officer in the area where his kids had been sent. And he said, I want you to go to the hospital and I want you to put your eyeballs on my kids. And I want you to call me and tell me that my kids are okay, because I cannot believe after what I've just seen that my kids were in this room and that my kids are okay. They cannot be okay. They can't be okay after seeing what I've just seen. And the officer said, okay, I'll go to the hospital. I'll look at your kids. And so with that, Ron, he just had to keep doing his job. So he collected all of those diaries of David's and took them all to town hall, to the basement, where they were going to set up a war room to investigate this. And he started to look through them. About the time he got to town hall, the officer called back and he told him, no, it's true. I saw your wife. I saw your children. Everybody's okay. And Ron's like, can they see? Can they hear? Like, yes, they can see, they can hear. One of your kids has a little burn on his back, and the other one has some slight burns too. They're all doing really good. Nobody's in a bad way, very minor injuries. So after hearing that, Ron was like, okay, now I can focus and do my job. Later that night, he sees the school buses loaded with kids returning from the hospitals, and he runs out, and his kids jump off in the dark, and all he can see is the whites of their eyes and the gleam of their teeth because they're still covered in soot and black from head to toe. He just hugged them and checked on all of them, and they all were sent home to rest. Around 10 p.m., Kathy finally told the sheriff, "Okay, that's it. I'm spent. I'm gonna go home." And he's like, "Nope, you can't. You have to go help with the crime scene. I want you to go do a security check." And she was like, "Ugh, no, I am not going to go there." And they got into an argument, and 2 of the officers that were standing there, they grabbed her one by each arm and they started walking her to the school. And she's just outraged at this treatment. She wants to go home. Why is the sheriff she was laughing with over sandwiches? Why is he being such a jerk now and sending her to the school? And the whole way she's just ranting and raving and talking mad smack about the sheriff and all of that. And they get to the school and she turns around and realizes he's been walking like right behind her the entire walk over. And when they got there, the sheriff, he just smiled and he put his arm around Kathy's shoulder and he said, "Look, I'm just giving you a hard time. I just wanted you to come with me to the school because there's something you have got to see. You have got to see this." And so she goes in and he takes her into the classroom, and all the light sockets are melted, all the electrical outlets, all the windows are blown out. On the carpet, you could actually see the outlines of all the little bottoms from all the little kids that were sitting all around on the carpet when the initial explosion had gone off. And then he took her over to the blackboard And this was this thing that if you look online and Google this, you will see it. So Google it. It is copyrighted every which way from Sunday, so I cannot put it in the video. So, like seared into the wall. It looks like the skeletal outline of a person with big angel wings, as if during the blast they got put there like skeletonized against the wall, and all you see is the outline, kind of the white black outline. It is very creepy. It 100% looks like a skull face and wings. It's it's interesting. So he showed her that. And then after seeing the room for herself, then he said, "Now you can go home. I'll even send a deputy to drive you home." All through the day, students, teachers, and staff were recounting their memories of the event. Media flooded the town and they booked all the hotel rooms and they bought all the food out of the local diner, which left no food for any of the first responders or anyone else. So, all those sandwiches, they found a way to be eaten after all. Most of the first responders that were there for that week in town swore when they left that they would never eat another bologna sandwich for as long as they lived. Those seniors had outdone themselves in their sandwich making abilities. I'll tell you what, they made sandwiches that day. I guess, when there's nothing else you can do, you do what you can do and you do it to the full extent of your doing. Kathy, she recalled that day that as a new emergency coordinator, she had had absolutely no idea what she was supposed to be doing. But that everything had just gone the way it had gone off pretty much without a hitch, except for during the day, all through the day, she was trying to arrange that. There was this one firefighter, he just kept sending her notes that he wanted a porta potty on site because there were no porta potties, and where were the porta potties, and when she was going to get the porta potties, and how they were going to get the porta potties, all that stuff. So to this very day, Rich Haskell still occasionally sends her little notes and leaves her notes asking, where the hell are the porta potties, Kathy? Where are they? But humor aside, she was really grateful that they had not lost one child, that they had not lost one teacher. Meanwhile, Ron Hartley, he was sifting through those diaries, trying to make any sense of anything. And he said that David wrote down everything. Hartley and the FBI agent, a psychiatrist, they spent a lot of hours going through all of that and breaking down zero equals infinity. And Hartley told the FBI psychiatrist, I can't understand what he's talking about. I've been reading this and reading this, and I don't understand it. And the psychiatrist said, "Well, you know what? The day you do understand it, I'll start seeing you professionally. How about that?" Because it was just not something that should be understood. So don't worry about it. And despite the senselessness of the motives and the ramblings of this madman, as I mentioned in the beginning, and I will not disappoint, there were tales that miraculous things happened that day. At least 30 people who were in that room began to tell stories of a miracle. Many of the children said that as they sat in those circles and as they prayed, they began to see angels. Some kids said that they saw them hovering. Several of the kids had the same story in that moment when Tina was mentioning how the just felt different in the room all of a sudden. Ron Hartley, the lead investigator, his own son Nathan was one of the kids who described what they saw. He began to have flashbacks. So they sent him to a psychiatrist. And Ron wasn't huge on psychiatrists. As a law enforcement officer, he had seen psychiatrists put things in kids' heads. He didn't like it. So one day when Ron's at work, his wife takes their son, Nathan, to see the psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist came out of the room with Nathan and said, Nathan said that he had an angel that came and stood by him during the bombing. And he said that she told him to sneak carefully away from the bomb, that he had been near the bomb, but the angel came and said, "I need you to sneak carefully away from this bomb." And so, of course, his mother called his father at work and told his father, and Ron was absolutely livid. He dropped everything he was doing and he drove straight home. He hated the psychiatrist. He thought the doctor had put the stuff in his kid's head about angels. And he just barged in the house and he grabbed Nathan, he sat him down and started interrogating him like he was a hardened criminal. And he was going to show Nathan, "You are wrong. This psychiatrist tricked you and put this in your mind." And he sat him down and he said, "Okay, Nathan, what did you see?" He said, "Well, I had an angel come and she stood right by me, and it was Grandma Meister, I think. And so Ron was like, aha, aha, aha. And he told his wife, Claudia, get the family album because he was going to show him, your Grandma Meister. She is alive. She is well. She is at a nursing home. And it could not have been her. And when they pulled the picture out, he said, yeah, there she is. That's her. And that was the other grandma who had passed away that Nathan had never met. She had held him once when he was like 1 year old, and he never seen a picture of her, never knew her. And he pointed her out and said, there she is. That's the angel who saved me. And Ron sat back in his chair and he was just like, Nathan, are you sure that's who you saw? And Nathan said, yeah, that's my angel. There are angels all around us. Everyone had an angel, even Doris. But Doris's angel, she left right before the bomb went off. But David, he didn't have an angel. He didn't have one. And he said that my angel told me, quick, go to the window. And before I even recognized what she said, the bomb went off. And he said, but it was okay because the angels were around the bomb and they were holding hands around the bomb. And so when the bomb went off, it just went straight up to the ceiling and all the angels went through the ceiling with the bomb, with the explosion. That gives me goosebumps. And Ron said, Nathan, why didn't you tell me this before? And Nathan said, Dad, you would never have believed me if I told you before. And, Ron felt it's probably true. He probably wouldn't have believed it as much if he had been told before. And he felt his kid already had it hard enough that he was the son of one of the only town officers. And he's like, Nathan, you can't go around. You're already the son of a police officer. You can't go around telling people you saw angels in the classroom that day. That's not going to go over well, son. Just keep it on the down low, would you? Just maybe not tell people that you saw angels. Maybe we could just not do that. But many of the survivors swear, along with Nathan, that it was divine intervention that saved them. So Nathan's not alone. Little Cameron Wixom, he wrote that it was childlike faith that saved us. We just so truly believed and innocently believed. Cliff Sparks, she didn't see anything that day herself, but she said she totally believes the kids because she said there were too many things that happened, not only on that day, but leading up to that day that just would have been such a crazy coincidence. Not only did the bomb have all these tiny things, that drip of gasoline dripping all day, that wet the powder, that prevented all this stuff, but also for weeks before David and Doris Young took over the school, their school fire alarm kept triggering over and over and over and over. And they had to take all the kids outside. The fire department would come and they would look and they couldn't figure out there was no fire. No one was manually triggering the alarms. So while other firefighters were inside checking the school furnace and doing things, all the other firefighters were outside with the kiddos. And so they were teaching the kids all these nifty safety tips about fire and how to best escape their classrooms and what to do if they were ever on fire. So the kids had like the several week period where they had intensive fire safety and fire escape training because of all these false alarms that just kept going off and kept going off and kept going off. And Cliss thinks that's why the kids were able to evacuate that room so fast on the day of the bombing and no kids were killed in the fire was because they had been so taught how to escape out of the windows specifically. The firefighter would tell them, escape out the windows. If you're here, escape this way. And if you're here, escape this way. And they were all so well trained by those false alarms that it saved them, that they were able to go. So she said that that was one of the things that was going on. And then Katie Walker Payne, she said that that day, as she sat there coloring, she looked up and there was just this woman standing there that was all dressed in white. And she had a long white dress on. She said she had short, dark hair. And she said, Katie, honey, I love you so much. And what I need you to do is you need to listen to your brother. And remember that I will always love you. And Katie it was just a strange lady in a white dress. And she was like, okay. And she looked back down at her coloring and then she looked back up and the woman was just gone. And she didn't see her anywhere in the room. She had just vanished. And then right after that, her brother Travis came up and he said, "Hey, honey, we're gonna go sit over by the window." And that was Glenna's son, Travis, who was so torn up, who had thought he heard a voice or felt a voice or something that told him to take his little sisters and go put them by the window. And there's his little sister, not having heard Travis say that, has her own account that this lady came and told her that she was gonna need to listen to her brother. So Katie, in the weeks after the bombing, she just kept telling her parents about the lady in white who had talked to her and then vanished. And 8 months later, her mother had found this locket. And the significance of this locket was that Glenna's mom had died when Glenna was only 15 years old. And Glenna only had one picture of her mother, and it was in this locket. And she found it. She hadn't been able to find it for a while, and she found it. And she called the girls over, like, "Look, I found a picture of my mom." And she opened the locket and she showed it to the girls. And Katie said, "It's her. It's the lady in white. It's the lady. She's the lady. That's her. That's her right there. She's the one who came and told me to listen to Travis." So again, another inexplicable thing. Meanwhile, Jenny Johnson, she was 7 at the time. And when the bomb went off, this woman came and took her by the hand and led her out of the building. The woman did not say a single word to Jenny. She just took her and led her. And Jenny tried to turn around to go back for her shoes, and the woman just motioned her, like, "No, come on, come on." So she just followed the woman. And the woman got her outside and she put her aside and she told her, "Don't go back." And then the woman just vanished. She took off. She didn't see her again. So when Jenny went back to school, she kept looking for this teacher. She said, "A teacher saved me. There was this teacher that came and she took me and she saved me." And she kept looking and looking for this teacher and she couldn't ever find her. And she was really frustrated because she really wanted to tell the teacher, "Thank you. Thank you for saving me." And she could never find her. So one day when she's 12 years old and in 5th grade, she's sitting at her grandma's house and she's looking through a family photo album. And she's like, "There's a teacher. It's the teacher who saved me." And she said, Grandma, who's this teacher? What's this teacher's name? And why did she quit? Why'd she quit teaching after the bombing?" And her grandma like took the photo album and looked at it and said, "Honey, that's not a teacher." And she's like, "No, it is. It's the teacher who led me out of the building on the day of the bombing. I finally found her. Who is she?" And her grandma teared up and she said, "Honey, that's your Aunt Ruth. She died many years ago, several years ago. It couldn't have been her that saved you from the bombing." But Jenny, she just says, "Yes, it was. Yes, it was. It was her. That was her. It was her that saved me." Many of the kids recall seeing a bright light appear above the bomb right before the explosion. The angels, some of them had the same story as Nathan, the angels going through the ceiling, holding hands around the bomb and protecting the kids from a big part of the blast and just taking the blast and going through the ceiling. Others say it looked like a hand, like a light reaching down right as Doris pulled the strap right before she pulled it. It was like this hand reaching down toward the bomb. That's what they said. It's up to you to make up your own mind. Are these traumatized little kids hallucinating? Are they having false memories? Did they really see these things? Did these things really happen? Is that how they were saved? Is that why all these inexplicable things went on for weeks before and in the day of that saved all their lives? Another little girl in there, the little girl who didn't know how to pray and had never prayed before, she was horrifically burned. Her eyelashes were gone, her hair was gone, her face was white, and she was completely unrecognizable with her burns. Even the nurses at the hospital just cried while they were cleaning out her burns. But that little girl, she had just learned about prayer, and she heard that there were 2 priesthood holders that were in the hospital and they were praying. And she asked, "Can they please come and pray for me?" And she said when they prayed, she felt that exact same feeling that she felt in the classroom, just this deep peace. And she said she experienced this incredible feeling of being known, if that makes sense, and loved. And she said in that moment, she was told, "Your scars are going to completely heal, and no one is going to look upon your face and know what happened to you." Instead, the scars that she would have would become forgiveness and trust. Her skin began to heal at an inexplicable rate. Despite the severe burns that had doctors talking to her parents about skin grafts and plastic surgery, her skin healed beautifully with not a bit of scar tissue at all. So from that day forward, she really gained faith. Tina, for a long time, the school secretary, she was living with guilt and she was feeling like I could have stopped it. I could have done something and made him blow it up in the office, and then none of the kids would have been burned. They wouldn't have been hurt. It would just been us in the office, the adults that were hurt. And they told her, no, 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 Tina, no, no, because the gasoline had not leaked into the powder yet. And had you done something in that office and made him blow it up, then it would have taken down the whole school. It would have been completely different. And Tina, she would suffer for PTSD severely for a long time. As she sat in the school's office, she would have these horrible dreams that David had been reincarnated, and he walked back into the office and he would just be like, "Hi, Miss Cook, I'm back," and things like that. And she would just, as she sat there, she just feared every day in the office that he was just going to walk in, just this ridiculous fear. She knew he wasn't going to be reincarnated, but she just felt like he was going to. David's two friends and Princess were never charged with any crime because they refused to participate. Music teacher who had been shot, he came back to the school. They started bringing the kids back to the school within a day or so and meeting them in the gym and letting them all see each other and let them know your friends are okay. Everyone's alive. We're not lying to you and telling you your friends are alive. Your friends are really alive. Here they are. Here's everyone. Everyone's okay. And they also offered the children, do you guys want to go do a walkthrough of the classroom? Because they felt like if the kids could see the classroom in the absence of the bad people, now that they know everybody was okay and they could walk through and ask the questions and see the repair process from beginning to end, from its destruction to its, renewal and all of that, that would help the children to cope and to process what had happened. Also, Mr. Miller, the music teacher who had been shot, he came and the kids were asking, I think some it started out with some of the kids asking to see his wound. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, you guys better look. It's healing up so fast. If you don't look at it today, it's probably gonna be gone by the time you see me next time." Just trying to reassure them that he was fine. It was nothing. He was healing real quick and it was almost gone. School went back into session 3 days later. And some of those babies, there are pictures of their daddies carrying them all bandaged with their little arms all bandaged, like their daddies carrying them back into the class and sitting them down. And Cliff Sparks, she later said when the bomb went off, it was just amazing to her that the way it went straight up and into the ceiling. And she's like, "Yeah, it should not have done that." And she said it should have like gone out in every direction. She said, but it didn't. And just because of the way it was bizarrely, like the whole force just went up and blew out the ceiling, but it didn't explode the way it should have. Thank God. And she said that she really felt that the Lord must have been there and that some of the kids in that room that day were meant to do very good things in this world. And that's why they were kept alive. So, what do you think? Did angels, divine intervention, visitors beyond the grave come to Cokeville Elementary that day to save the children, shield them from the bomb blast? Or was it just lady luck? Drop your thoughts into the comments. And until next time, stay safe, listen to your gut, for the horrors persist, but so do we. Thank you for stopping by. I'll see you all next time.